I'm grateful to have this opportunity to say a few words about Kane. As you know that we as students in the 70s were encouraged to call our teachers with their first names. So we used to call him Kane. But then Professor Gopal said that what is this Kane? We should call him by his first name. So there was an experiment made to call him Narayanan, which didn't work. So eventually what stayed was Kane. I would like to speak a bit about him in a personal way, not only as an eminent scholar and a committed activist, but also as a mentor, a friend, a person with an enormous sense of humor, and so on. He joined, as Romila said, in 1971, the year teaching started in CHS. So he was there right from the beginning. The same year that Mridula had also joined, and in 72 I joined as the first batch of students, MA students in JNU. So from 72 till 1993, when he left to become the Vice Chancellor of the Sanskrit University.
He left in 2000.
Was it?
Yeah.
Was it 2000? Okay, I'm sorry. I thought it was 93. So it was a very long time that one had a almost day-to-day relationship with him. And just to tell you, the younger people, what the atmosphere was in the 1970s, nobody in CHS had a car, except Professor Bipin Chandra and Professor Romila Thapar. And Romila Thapar used to stay in campus, and Professor Bipin Chandra's car, the students and faculty members were afraid to get in, because occasionally they would have to get off and push the car because it would often not work. The rest of us had either cycles and at best a scooter, but most didn't even have that. Another thing about the 1970s was that there was only one telephone among the CHS faculty members, and that was in Professor Bipin Chandra's house. So if you had to make any urgent call or anything, or even call your girlfriend and give an excuse, so you'd all run to Professor Bipin Chandra's house. And there was only one black and white television, and that was in Professor Panikkar's house. So every few days, I think it was a week, every week, there used to be this Doordarshan program called Chitrahar, which was very popular. So we would all troop into his house and sit and watch the whole program with endless amounts of coffee and snacks, etc. And then they were kind enough to persuade Mridula and I to stay on for dinner. So Professor Panikar and his wife Usha were extremely generous people. They virtually adopted Mridula and I as a member of the family, and he treated me like a son. But like most sons, the sons occasionally rebel, which I did. And I must say, to my eternal gratitude, that he let that rebelliousness pass. And we were able to again bond with him in his later years, especially when he moved to Kerala. And they were able to visit him several times in Bangalore and in Trivandrum. He, as Romila said, very bravely faced up to his illness, a Parkinson's which very rapidly advanced, but yet he would refuse to move out of what he thought was his Karma Bhumi, Kerala. He would live alone even after Usha had passed away, and not stay with his children, and in easily much greater comfort, but he would rather stay where his roots were and his commitment lay. The good thing was he deserved to go peacefully, and I learned that he did. In the end was peaceful, even though his children could not be with him at the last minute. A lot has been spoken about his academic contribution. I'll just make a few comments. It is not, his first book is often not mentioned, so I might bring it to the notice of a lot of people who do not know about it. His first book was on British diplomacy in northern India, a study of the Delhi Residency, 1803-1857. It was a political history, a different kind of history than that what he took up later on. But that is what he started with. And he graduated from Rajasthan and came here first to Hansraj College, and then he used to take classes in Delhi University, which many people, including Mridula, attended. And as was said, that he was known as a very good teacher, and that is one reason why he was persuaded to come and join JNU. After coming here, within a few years, his second major work came out, the Against Lord and State, Religion and Peasant Uprisings in Malabar, 1830s to 1921. That the book came out, I think, in 1972. And this was then followed by a number of works on culture, ideology, social consciousness, communalism, etc. One of the landmark books that I might want to mention here in this context was called Before the Night Falls, Forebodings of Fascism in India, which was published in January 2002, weeks before the Godhra uprising. He was a fearless scholar, as you can make out from the way he wrote, but he was also an activist. He was a founder member of the organization called ANHAD, that many of you would be familiar with, that is Act Now for Harmony and Democracy. That's what ANHAD stands for. And he, Shabnam Hashmi and Harsh Mandar were the founder members of this organization. And the organization, right from its beginning, took on the most difficult tasks. The first thing they did was to go and work in Gujarat after the Godhra massacres following the Godhra incident. The other areas they worked in was Kashmir. Apart from his activism and his scholarly work, he also, I think it must be mentioned, that he took on the burden of being an administrator and did a wonderful job of that in Kerala. He was the chairperson of the Kerala Council for Historical Research. He headed the Kerala Higher Education Council, and during his tenure, the entire effort that the NCERT was making, for example, as you're all aware of, to trying to mess with our textbooks, a big resistance was put up by Kerala in their textbooks. They defied the communal pressures consistently, and Professor Panikar had played a major role in keeping education in Kerala on the right rails. It's not an easy task. It is, as you can see, even now not an easy task, even in states where the BJP does not rule. Just the last few words on his teaching and impact on the CHS. Again, being fortunate to be among the first batch of students, we were showered with a lot of affection, time, energy, and of course experiments. The first experiment that was made on us was we used to have to write 16 tutorials per semester, which almost killed half the class. Many of them running to aims for, mental health issues. And it's a fact. You can check it out from your seniors. So then gradually, as you know, it was brought down to 12, and now it is half. But then it was a great experiment, and we learned a lot. I remember Professor Panikar was the first, used to teach 2 courses. Many of you don't know, he used to also teach China. He used to teach a course called Imperialism in China. And he taught a course at that time initially called the Social and Religious Reforms in the 19th Century, then the History of Ideas, and eventually the Intellectual History of Modern India. And so some things that he taught at that time, we were young students, have stuck. And historiography since then has often built on these things. One of the things that he used to question was this whole business of what he called the impact response model. The impact of the Enlightenment and the developments in Europe leading to reforms and change in ideas in India. He questioned that very, very frontally, giving us examples like the fact that Ramon Roy, he would say that he wrote the Tuhafat, the major treatise that he wrote, was before he learnt English. It was based on his scholarship in Sanskrit and Persian. He gave several examples to try and suggest the theme, which as I said, has now become quite acceptable, that there are alternate routes to modernity. I mean, the notion that modernity only emerged from Europe, as you know, imperialism was one of the defenses of imperialism was this, that it brought modernity to the colonies. Now he questioned that, and scholarship since then has emerged. A lot of work has been done to show that it is complete rubbish to say that modernity necessarily had only one route, and that was the European one. The second big learning that we had at that time, which was a break for us, and particularly students like us who had, I was not a student of history like many others, like Indivar, for example, he came from physics, I came from economics, so many people came from literature, Sucheta came from economics, etc. So it was a big learning for us to question what was clearly a Eurocentric view of the early modern period. That is, the 19th century being seen as a period where progress emerges after the dark 18th century. So colonialism brings in, again, not only wisdom, but also all sorts of other benefits. Now, this was very much a Eurocentric view, which was, as you know, has been pushed even by scholars like Eric Hobsbawm, who talk of the 19th century as the great breakthrough in world civilization, etc., etc., whereas that was the century when the colonies, India and China, were really, their noses were rubbed on the ground, and it was our worst century. The 18th century was our great century. India produced 8 times the GDP of the United Kingdom in the 18th century. So what Panikar was able to show was that it's not only the economic, that even in other spheres, in literature, art, culture, music, the 18th century was not a dark century, So that was something which was very new and fresh to us, and we learned, and I'm just giving you 2 examples of what we learned from him. I'd like to just end by saying that in his passing, we have lost a kind, generous, very brave person who stood up against any injustice that he came across very courageously. And I think if his students and colleagues, people with whom he worked his entire life, were to keep up this tradition of courage and fighting against what they know is wrong, his soul will perhaps rest in peace. Thank you.